It's the Inside Scoop Virginia, all the news Virginians want to know. Now here's the host of Inside Scoop Virginia, George Burke.
Welcome to this week's edition of Inside Scoop Virginia. My name is George Burke. My guest tonight is Mike Turner. Mike is a Democratic candidate for the 10th Congressional District. He's seeking to win the nomination to run against Frank Wolf. Mike, you got an illustrious bio here. Retired colonel in the Air Force, graduate of the Air Force Academy, Iraq war veteran, fighter pilot, spending time in Africa with Madeleine Albright, working for Norman Schwarzkopf. That's a lot of stuff.
That was a lot of fun, George.
And you live in Loudoun County, is that correct?
Loudoun County. We live in Waterford, that's right.
Yeah. And with your wife, Kathy, and
right.
you have 3 grown children, a couple of grandchildren. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. My pleasure to be here.
Let's start right off the bat, getting into a little bit of the political side. Number one, and we're going to get to the issues.
Sure.
But you're going against an entrenched incumbent, number
right.
one, who's been in office for 27 years or
right.
something. He's an institution out there, although we've watched his numbers shrink in recent
right.
years. The 10th is turning bluer and bluer. I would not want to suggest it's as blue as the 11th, but as the chair of the 11th, I don't have much to say. We still have a Republican holding that office, Tom
right.
Davis. Hopefully
right.
not for long. And hopefully not for long in the 10th. Why are you the best candidate to challenge Frank Wolf? Let's get right into it.
Sure. That's a great question. I think one of the things that's occurred since 9/11 is that there's a sense of urgency in this country and a sense of malaise. And the only way I can characterize it, and I haven't experienced it in my lifetime, and it's very disturbing as a former military officer, but also I've been pretty involved with the communities I've lived in since I graduated from college. And I have this abiding sense in this country that for the first time in a very long time, if ever, that the American people really feel like we have somehow lost our mooring, that our anchor point has been set adrift, and that our moral compass is not as set and as focused as it has been in prior years. I'm very disturbed by a lot of the activities and a lot of the actions and a lot of the short-sightedness and frankly hubris of the Bush administration. And I think one of the things I learned over a very long time in the military was that an organization tends to take on the characteristics of its leader. And I think the best that can be said of the current administration is that we have witnessed for the past 7 years a profound lack of leadership. And that, I think, is the best that we can say. And so, given that kind of an environment and that kind of malaise, which is bad enough in and of itself, if we juxtapose that against the nature of the world and the urgency in the world and the seriousness of the issues since 9/11, it's a very, in my judgment, deeply concerning combination. And so I think the American people have a right to expect substantive decision-making and coherent, thoughtful process out of their government, and certainly out of the Congress. And I don't frankly believe that Congressman Wolf has provided that. I don't think he's provided it for a very long time. And I think the American people, and particularly the voters of the 10th District, have a right to expect considerably more from their elected congressman.
Judy Fader ran last time and had a respectable finish,
right.
Given the entrenched incumbent.
You bet.
She spent a lot of money. She raised $1.5 million or something
right.
like that.
Right.
You have been working this for some time now. I remember you coming before the FCDC. It seems like it has to be 6 or 8 months ago now.
About that, yeah.
But how do you match up? I'm not asking you to lay your strategy out on the table, of course. But how do you match up against Judy Fader? I mean, where do you see your pluses, and what chords will you strike with the voters to show them that you think you're the better candidate over Judy?
I think that's right on point. And frankly, Professor Fader is a friend, and I campaigned very hard for her last time. Mm-hmm. And it was unfortunate that she fell as short as she did. But it causes us to have to ask the question, if a challenger to Frank Wolf can raise more money than the incumbent, which is almost unheard of, mm-hmm. and lose by that margin, then clearly we're doing something in the runs against Frank Wolf that is not resonating with the voters, and so we need to figure out what that is. And let me address that question in a more generic sense. Let me paint for you a picture of what I consider to be the ideal candidate to challenge Frank Wolf where he ought to be challenged. I think that candidate needs to be a moderate in the 10th District. The 10th District extends from McLean basically down at Spine, which is Route 7, all the way out to Winchester. You have Fairfax County, which is arguably swing, but I would suggest after the last few elections probably even leaning Democratic, particularly in the precincts that fall in the 10th District. You have Loudoun County.
We saw John Faust edge out John Dubois
Exactly.
in many of those precincts out there for the supervisor.
That's right. A lot of the local races really began to show what I think is a slight Democratic leaning. Loudoun County is I think I could make a compelling case that Loudoun County is arguably ground zero for what's going on in the country right now in the Democratic Party and really in the voting electorate.
And a strong organization out there. Tom Barris does a good job of running that shop, running the party there, and I know you've worked very hard out there.
Yeah, the Loudoun County Democratic Committee is just dynamite. The voters out in Loudoun County are very thoughtful and reasonable. And then the third of the 10th District voting population is actually either south or west of Loudoun County, and that tends to be a more conservative district. So I think that the candidate that runs against Frank Wolf successfully will be a moderate. I consider myself a social progressive and a fiscal conservative. I believe very deeply, I consider myself to be a staunch environmentalist. I believe very deeply in the progressive positions on a lot of the social issues, but I think that we need to create a partnership with industry and with private enterprise in this country that creates a sustainable funding mechanism for those kinds of social programs. And so I'm a fiscal conservative, and I think that plays very well with the Northern Virginia business community. We have to win the Northern Virginia business community. I think we have to be able to appeal to a broad swath of independent voters. Based on my experience supporting the 22 candidates that I've supported over the last year and a half running up to the local races, a lot of doors that I knocked on, the people inside those homes consider themselves independents. Whether they vote that way or not, if you ask the question, they consider themselves independents. I think the candidate has to appeal to a broad swath of people who consider themselves independent. And I think we need to win back labor. When I moved here 2.5 years ago, I was frankly shocked to find that Frank Wolf has support among a lot of the labor unions. And I think we need to re-engage the labor unions and say, why is that? And what do we need to do to win back your support? And finally, I think that any candidate that is going to be viable in the 10th District has to play well with the more conservative areas out in the west and south of Loudoun County. And I think my military background resonates well with that.
Have you found a lot of retired military living in the 10th?
Actually, I've always been surprised as I've moved around the country, first in my military career and then in my nonprofit career, how many retired military there are throughout our society. It's very rare when I go to any sort of function with more than 10 or 15 people there where I don't have someone come up to me and say, oh, I used to do this in the military, I used to do that. Last night I went to a supper club meeting with maybe 12 or 13 people in the room and bumped into a fighter pilot, and we talked airplanes for 25 minutes. So it's there's a lot of retired military. There's a lot of military issues in the 10th District, particularly in Washington, which is really the nerve center for the military.
When we have a break in about 5 or 6 minutes, and after the break, I want to spend some time talking about your position on the Iraq War. And
sure.
It's obviously a unique perspective of someone who's spent nearly 3 decades in the military. But why don't you spend a couple of minutes enlightening me in terms of your career? I glossed over your bio a little bit, and there's so much to it.
Sure.
Let's talk a little bit about your involvement in the military and your post-military work.
Sure, you bet. As you said, I had a long military career, which was very exciting. Most people in the military tend to fly 1 or 2 airplanes when they fly, and that's pretty much it. For whatever reason, I had a fairly strange career in that I right after graduating from the academy, I went straight into helicopters and air rescue work. Did that in 2 assignments, and at the 6-year mark, switched over and began to fly fighters, which is a fairly strange progression. And then because of the nature of what was going on at the time, I kept changing airplanes and requalifying in different airplanes. So I flew fighters for the rest of my career, essentially. 3 different types, and then I had 2 staff assignments during that flying career. and as a total of 7 years, really, and they were all joint assignments, which means even though I was in the Air Force, I spent 7 years working in jobs where all 4 services were represented by the command that I was in. And I ended up working directly for General Schwarzkopf for about 2.5 years, and ended up my career working on the Joint Staff when Wesley Clark was there as the Strategic Plans and Policy Director. Very involved with U.S. foreign military policy, very involved with the war, the Desert Storm and Desert Shield, the build-up to those wars. And it was a fascinating time in the military. I really enjoyed it. I entertained the notion of working for for-profit community for about an hour towards the end of my career. And I had been motivated by public service since I was 17 years old, and had an opportunity to go work for the American Red Cross. And that started my career, my second career in nonprofits. And I did that, and then junior achievement for a short time, and just finished up with the National Foundation for Credit Counseling in Silver Spring. Absolutely love the nonprofit sector. Great place to work.
One of the things you neglected, and I neglected to mention in your resume, is, like me, you're a professional ski instructor.
That's right, I am. I had a break in my career for about 6 months, and had an opportunity to do something that I dreamed about doing since I was a kid on my dad's knee. And we were living in Colorado Springs at the time, and I called up Breckenridge and said, well, are you looking for any instructors? And I didn't even know if I'd qualify, and they said, sure, come on up. And that season I was a ski instructor. The new instructors get the kids, so my job was to pick up the never-ever skiers from 12 or 15 young children and shepherd them around the slopes until 4 in the afternoon, which was an experience in and of itself.
Tell me about it. I can picture your route now. You lived at, I take it you were stationed at some point at Peterson out there at the Springs,
no, actually Junior Achievement took me out there. Their headquarters was in Colorado Springs, and it was kind of mecca for the Air Force. There's 5 bases out there.
So you would go up through Gunwood Springs, and you'd cross over that plateau, and you'd hit Hoosier Pass and come down the other side right into Breckenridge. I've done it many times.
That's exactly how I did it.
Avoiding Denver, avoiding I-25, avoiding most of that mess on 70, and you roll right into Breckenridge.
Yep.
I've done that many times in snowstorms to boot, where it was a little hairy coming through the pass, but it was good skiing. Just as a prelude, we only have about a minute left before we break, but you flew, I don't want to get into it too much because I want to talk to you afterwards, but you flew Iraq during Desert Storm?
No, I was a staff officer for General Schwarzkopf in Desert Storm. I actually flew Operation Provide Comfort, which was the northern no-fly zone to protect the Kurds, and I did that in '92. So it was after Desert Storm, and we were enforcing the no-fly zone, and our route basically brought us down between Syria and Iran, and then across Mosul and back up.
And one of the things I'm going to want to talk about after the break, and I'm sure our viewers will be interested, it's interesting to me. There are more and more people from the military are entering the political arena. Jim Webb, Doug Denenny's running in the 11th.
You bet.
And it's interesting to see where they come down on the war. So we will be back in 2 minutes. My guest is Mike Turner. He is running in the 10th Congressional District. We're going to talk about the war. He is opposed to the war. He's got some experience in war. So we'll hear more about that when we come to the break. Thanks for watching.
This is Mommy's bed. Me and Jenny were jumping on it. Mommy's gun fell on the floor. I was a cowboy. Bang, 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 bang. I said, Jenny, wake up, it's just pretend. But she wouldn't wake up.
If you give me a fish.
If you give someone a fish,
you feed them for a day.
Teach someone to fish.
You feed them for a lifetime.
Give me a fish, and you'll feed me for a day. Teach me to fish, and you'll feed me for a lifetime.
Through Volunteers of America, you can help change lives in your community.
Hey, mister, studied algebra in school and got a better job than I could. You take the last couple.
Oh, no, mister. Stuck in an entry-level job because you only learned basic math. I don't have a boss riding my butt like you do, so you take it so you can get back to your desk.
You know, I probably should, but maybe Miss AP Calculus with the $200 haircut in the big office upstairs would like a cup.
Oh, no, Mr. What was your name again? Never mind, it doesn't matter. I'm too busy doing important things to care. I just came down for some sweet and start.
You know, if my limited math abilities weren't keeping me from getting a better job, I'd quit this afternoon.
I don't blame you. But thank goodness you're stuck here because we really need someone to make the coffee.
Now back to the Inside Scoop, Virginia. Call in live and let your voice be heard. Here again, your host, George Burke.
Feel free to give us a call if you want to talk to Mike. Our call-in number is 571-749-1166. Mike Turner is a Democratic nominee. There's two. He's running against Judy Fader. I don't think we're going to see anybody else in there for the Democratic nomination to face Frank Wolf. Frank has a token opponent. I understand. I can't remember the name of the guy.
I believe his name is Vern McKinley.
Yeah.
He announced and then was never heard from again, so I'm not sure what's going on there.
The phantom candidate. It's interesting whether it's Jim Webb, Doug Denneny, who's running in the 11th, some friends of mine who are back from Iraq. To a person, they are opposed to the war because what they've seen over there, etc. They're all patriots. They'd all go to war again tomorrow if it was necessary. But they feel that this war is wrong, and I think more and more the American public is seeing it that way too. They're learning we were snookered by the Bush administration. It's causing some problems for some of our national presidential candidates because they took the administration at its word, and now they're getting hammered for voting for the war on the front end. But I'm interested in your perspective as a warrior, so to speak.
Sure.
How you came from your position of obviously doing your duty in the military to opposing the war. You know, how did that come about?
Well, it's a great question, George. And to be perfectly candid, I've opposed the war since candidate George Bush in, what was it, 1999, when he was running the first time. Started making noises about taking out Saddam Hussein. And frankly, you have to go back to the war room in Desert Storm to really get the basis. I briefed General Schwarzkopf and the Secretary of Defense and the chairman in the war room, and I can tell you that in a staff of hundreds of people, from the very first, I landed on the first airplane in Desert Shield. From the very first airplane until the end of that war, I never remember a single person talking seriously about crossing the Euphrates River and going north for just the reasons that we've seen in this war. When the president first started talking about this, I told my wife, I said, no reasonably informed electorate and no marginally functional Congress would allow a commander-in-chief to do something so egregiously irresponsible as what he's talking about. And then, of course, 9/11 hit. And all the rules kind of went by the wayside, and we dropped into this massive national groupthink. And when we first invaded Afghanistan, I thought, that's excellent. That's right on point. That's exactly what we want to do. And do the job and get out. And it was exactly correct. And then we started talking about going into Iraq. We've now learned in any number of sources and books that the discussions that were going on about Iraq behind the scenes were far more involved and far more ominous for months before the American public was ever told what was going on. I actually finally became so incensed with what was going on that I wrote a commentary for National Public Radio. The commentary is on my website. I actually delivered it on March 11th in 2003, about 10 days before the war started. And I basically said to the American people, you think that this is Desert Storm 2. In fact, this is Somalia on a national scale. It is a quagmire in the making, and it's a disaster. And we simply cannot allow this to happen. And sadly, a lot of those predictions in that, and I missed on some, but a lot of the predictions, the general picture that I painted in that commentary, was exactly what we have.
Do you think the administration understood the tribal nature of Iraqi society?
The administration understood virtually nothing about the invasion. To read the specific first-person accounts of the discussions that went on, about the planning that did not go on, about the simplistic view of that part of the world, one of the most complex and dangerous areas of the world, it's appalling to me that an administration would be that reprehensibly irresponsible and short-sighted in their activities over there. Go ahead.
You know, Saddam, we'll all agree Saddam was a bad guy, but there's lots of bad guys out there.
Sure.
And, you know, we went in there, we took him out, but we haven't been able to put anything in place to replace it. We didn't understand the differences between the Sunnis and the various tribes that are there. I have a friend who's an American, but he's of Iraqi descent, and he has relatives over there who were living a middle-class existence. You know, had electricity 24 hours a day, had water, had stores, drove nice cars, and you know, they could have been living in Annandale, Virginia.
You bet.
And other than the terrain was a little different, and now they live like refugees. Now they're in fear for their lives. They're lucky if they have several hours a day of electricity. They've got to go out to get ice to keep their foodstuffs done. I mean, they're living the bedraggled existence. And, you know, they moan about it. I mean, they don't hate the Americans. They understand, they don't quite understand why we came in and did what we did, because we basically tore their society down, made it into pretty primitive existence again, and now we can't seem to build it up because we've created a new generation of young terrorists. In Iraq and outside of Iraq.
Everything about the war in Iraq is extremely dangerous for the United States, and the degree to which we have stumbled so badly in this effort is staggering first, and second, holds very serious portent for the future. Men and women in uniform, to your earlier point, men and women in uniform don't ask a whole lot of their civilian leadership. Fundamentally, if they're told to go do a job, they're going to go do a job. They simply ask that the civilian leadership do their homework, that they study and analyze the repercussions of their actions, and they trust that when they're ordered to go do a job, that in fact that due diligence has taken place. To learn after the fact, and my own feeling was, as I talked to my wife as I saw this buildup, and why I was so irate and why I went on National Public Radio, was that having worked in the Pentagon for 4 years and knowing many of the individuals that were involved in this process and what that process was behind the scenes, the symptoms to someone watching it going on were so clearly indicative of horrific micromanagement, filtered decision-making in which the decision's already been made and we're simply filtering out the information to arrive at the preordained conclusion. All of that was so disturbing to me that I simply had to speak up. And frankly, I have had many very painful discussions with former military officers, friends, and colleagues who are not happy at all about those of us who oppose the war. But to your earlier point, I personally, frankly, feel like it's my patriotic duty, knowing this process, to stand up and say this is bad U.S. policy. Frank Wolf, frankly, has voted for this policy. He has sustained this policy. He took credit for the Iraq Study Group and then turned around and actually voted against the non-binding resolution on the floor of the House, which recommended to the President to follow the Iraq Study Group's recommendations. He voted against that. He has absolutely supported this war from the beginning, and I think it is egregiously irresponsible because, frankly, I don't think he addresses it because he doesn't know how he got us into this, and he doesn't know how to get us out.
He just blindly followed Bush.
Absolutely.
You know, one of the things that is particularly disturbing, I mean, let's go back in history, first of all. When our Vietnam vets came back, they were treated very shabbily. By the public. Besides the government, but by the public. And hopefully we have healed that wound. But that isn't the case, I think, with Iraq War veterans. The public understands how we got into this thing. The public understands that these men and women, all volunteers, are doing the job that they were sworn to do. And but what's particularly disturbing to me is how they are treated. Though, first of all, we have a lot of wounded coming back who would have been dead and now. Secondly, with what they've seen in Iraq and the situations they've had to deal with, many of them are coming back with mental issues and disturbances. We saw what was going on up at Walter Reed in that post expose, and I think that's just the tip of the iceberg. We're going to end up having a generation of veterans who have issues, who are going to be out on the streets, and there's going to be no help for them. And as much as the administration says, yes, we're going to help them, I just don't see it happening. And I don't see it improving. And, you know, we're going to have more and more of these men and women coming back, and they're going to have some serious issues to deal with, and we're not prepared to do it. How do we resolve it? I mean, do we have a Manhattan Project for the VA, or how do we?
That's just about right. That's just about right. I was today I was reading the Harvard study on the true cost of the wounded from Iraq. The interesting statistic is that they provided the wounded to killed in action ratio of the wars as far back as they had data, and generally that number was 2 to 3 to 1 for as far back as they could go. In Iraq and Afghanistan, the wounded to killed ratio in this war is 8 to 1, a substantive increase in the number of wounded that we will have in this war who in previous wars would have been killed because of the testament to the battlefield care that they get. However, with that statistic comes a fairly significant burden on our society to take care of those men and women who have done their duty and have come back now in very serious states of need.
In pieces sometimes.
Exactly. That's exactly
I mean, I hate to be so vulgar, but that's the truth.
At a cost, according to the Harvard study, they estimate that the care of veterans from this war, depending on how long it goes on, could be as high as $700 billion added to the actual cost of the war. And that has to be addressed. And I'm sorry that's expensive, and I'm sorry that's going to burden the economy, but that's a debt that has to be paid by the society.
You know, we were talking about skiing and ski instructing before. I was out at Breckenridge several years ago in Colorado, where they had one of these adaptive skiing clinics, and the Disabled American Veterans and the Professional Ski Instructors of America and the VA all combined to put on this program. And there were young women. I had a friend of mine had a woman in his class who was a mother to a young woman who had lost an arm, and she had been a competitive professional snowboarder before and was just didn't have it in her. She finally came out, saw ski instructors missing limbs and that type of stuff. And the mother was in tears. She was so happy at the daughter sort of getting her life back. We're going to continue with Mike Turner when we return at the break. We've got some other issues to talk about, but it's fascinating listening to his perspective on the Iraq War. So stay with us. We will be back in 2 minutes, and thank you for watching Inside Scoop, Virginia.
Some people in Fairfax County don't know what public access means.
Some think it's just another channel on the dial.
But it's much more than that.
It's the voice of the people.
People like you.
Your neighbors, your friends,
or your family.
People who want to share ideas,
opinions,
cultures, lifestyles,
art,
sports, music,
events, entertainment,
history,
science,
beliefs.
People who want to learn about television,
producing,
directing,
cameras, audio,
lighting,
editing, or radio, talk, music.
Whatever you think people should hear.
Public access is the place where everyone has a voice.
And it's the place where that voice gets heard.
A place where you can create your own form of personal expression.
So what do you want to say?
Whatever it is.
You can say it here.
Because we're public access.
For the people.
By the people.
It is about balancing our choices between the gray of the concrete jungle and the stunning beauty of the real one, between a stoic facade of granite and the fury of the canyon. It's why there's EarthShare, the simple way to find balance. EarthShare is the workplace giving program bringing the leading environmental groups under one umbrella. Support EarthShare, support them all. EarthShare. Please ask your employer about workplace giving. To learn more, visit our website.
Thousands of kids in this country have everything it takes to go to college, except the money. The United Negro College Fund. A mind is a terrible thing to waste.
Now back to the Inside Scoop, Virginia. Call in live and let your voice be heard. Here again, your host, George Burke.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop, Virginia. Again, my guest is Mike Turner, running for Congress as a Democrat in the 10th Congressional District. That's right next to the 11th Congressional District here in Northern Virginia. For those of you who live in Fairfax, there is a piece in Fairfax. I was very intrigued by your comments on the war. I mean, I think you gave us a real perspective. Let's move sort of internally to the states a little bit. You've been very active in housing, and right now, obviously, housing is one of the major causes of, I don't want to call it a recession yet, but of our economic downturn for sure, with the subprime mortgages, foreclosures, houses aren't selling. Sometimes people don't realize how much this gets magnified and grows because the people who work at the Home Depots get affected, the people who do the roofing, the people who manufacture the products that go into building homes get affected, the real estate agents, the brokers, the title companies. I mean, it just spreads out to a huge segment of the economy. And ultimately, what I think we're seeing now is people are losing some faith in the economy, and consumers are stopping spending in other sectors of the retail and wholesale business. So I'm a little worried about where the economy is going. But let's start with the housing issue a little bit.
My last job was working as the National Director of Housing Counseling at a large nonprofit in Silver Spring. And so I've been pretty involved with the housing issue for about two and a half years now. We have the largest network of housing counselors, nonprofit housing counselors in the United States, with well over 900 offices around the country. And we saw this building as we were applying for federal grant money last year, and I had to write the grant. We said $1 trillion in adjustable rate mortgages will reset in 2007, and that is of a serious concern to our organization. And the counselors are beginning to see that now. And I'm not sure anyone fully understood or grasped the magnitude of the problem as it began to hit. I was on a conference about a month ago with some of the key industry leaders, representative from the Center for Responsible Credit, I believe it is, or Center for Responsible Lending. And the disturbing part of that conversation was that they put up a chart which showed when the subprime loans, ARMs, the adjustable rate mortgages, would reset. And it's a bubble. It's obviously a bubble as to when those resets occur. And that bubble should peter out sometime in mid-2009. What was disturbing is that right behind the subprime bubble is another 2-year bubble of the no-doc loans and the option ARM loans.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right
I haven't
behind
heard
it,
that before.
which will carry this problem well into 2010, 2011, unless something's done about it. It's a very serious concern.
And those are the real big. Those are the the mega mansions and the mini mansions.
That's exactly
and the like.
right. Now, I'm going to throw out a statistic here, and I've read this statistic. I'm fairly sure this is correct, and I apologize that I'm not more certain.
Well, we'll clearly be more accurate than most of the bosses are.
The magnitude of the statistic is what's interesting. I believe the number is that right now, or as of September of 2007, Fairfax County had 1 out of every 257 homes in Fairfax County was in foreclosure, some phase of foreclosure. That number is 1 out of 89 in Loudoun and 1 out of 87 in Prince William. And I thought about that number for a second, and I realized the reason for that is because the growth trend through Fairfax and out into the outlying areas hit almost simultaneously with the explosion of all these exotic subprime mortgages. And so now we see all these adjustable rate mortgages resetting in the Loudoun and Prince William areas, and it's a problem. And I think it's going to continue to be a problem. And you're exactly right. The biggest issue about housing is the fact that it's the single largest piece of debt in anyone's personal budget. And so when you have an issue with housing and you have an issue with that magnitude of debt, it really does permeate all aspects of that family's budget, which of course has a multiplier effect into all aspects of the community. And if you actually trace out the mortgage crisis, you find that the consumers have a problem, The mortgage brokers are probably out of it because they immediately sold off the mortgage to the lenders. The lenders have a problem. The servicers who service those loans have a problem. And ultimately, the investors who bought the securitized bond bundles, our bonds, are also going to have a problem. The government has a problem because now if they step in and begin to change the terms of these loans, they face litigation from the investors. It really is a significant problem. But the simple fact is the private sector has, it's a classic case of market failure within the private sector. And I'm not ready to ascribe blame to any one player because we were all part of that process. Homeowners saw an opportunity to own a home for the first time in their lives. Mortgage brokers saw an opportunity to make a quick sale. The economy was booming. We all bear some of that burden.
Home ownership reached a new high percentage-wise in the
Absolutely. Minorities saw an opportunity to have home ownership for the first time. And so we all bear that burden. And unfortunately, we're in a situation right now where the problem is of such a magnitude, and I agree with you. I think we are poised on the cusp and the brink of a very serious economic problem in this country. And I think we need to now proactively and urgently begin to carve out some government-directed solutions, and I don't mean government bailouts. I mean government-facilitated solutions in partnership with private industry to begin to solve this problem.
Car dealers are not selling cars.
Absolutely.
And so you have a whole nother piece of the economy, and forget just the car salesmen in the showrooms. You've got the parts suppliers, the manufacturing side of it, et cetera. I mean, just take a look at Michigan. The retailers, a number of the retailers are reporting very disturbing Christmas sales.
You bet.
It's really scary. And as I said, you know, if you poll the polls that I've seen, people are tightening their belts. They're not, either they don't have the money to spend or they're reluctant to spend it. And if you don't spend money in our society, it's a consumer-driven economy.
That's right.
If you don't spend the money, the economy slumps.
That's absolutely right. It's interesting as a side note. In my capacity in my job as an aside, I met with Congressman Barney Frank about a month and a half ago. While I was in that meeting, I had noted that Congressman Wolf from the 10th District sits on the HUD subcommittee of appropriations. And I asked, there were 3 or 4 pieces of critical housing legislation that were moving through Congress. The FHA modernization bill, there was a predatory lending bill, there was a bill that had housing counseling funding in it that had just come out of conference or was in conference. And I asked Congressman Frank, I said, can you tell me what involvement has our 28-year tenured congressman from the 10th District, who sits on the HUD, the Housing and Urban Development Subcommittee of Appropriations, what involvement has he had with that legislation? And Congressman Frank looked at me and shook his head and he said, none, as far as I can tell. I find that appalling. And I think it speaks to a level of disengagement and a level of reactivity rather than proactivity, if that's a word, on the part of our senior congressman from the 10th District. Congressman Wolf's ranking by Congress.org, which is a nonpartisan website which provides an overall power ranking for every member of Congress. Going into the 2006 election, Congressman Wolf was ranked the 13th most powerful member of the U.S. House of Representatives. He was in the majority party. After the 2006 elections, Congressman Wolf's ranking dropped from number 13 to number 194, just a little bit above dead halfway. This is a 28-year veteran congressman, now ranked in the absolute middle of the pack. He's now in the minority party. You would think a congressman that had lost that much influence would at least be aggressively asserting his experience and his potential for influence on the floor of the House, and yet we find him not involved in some of the critical housing issues right now in Congress.
Plus, we're going to see looking at the numbers in the House, there are enough retirements and people and Republicans leaving that it's very likely that we're going to gain additional Democratic seats in the House of Representatives during this election. Plus, if the economy continues to tank, the party that was in power, the administration, is going to get punished, and as a result, their party will be punished.
That's right.
Not that I look forward to a recession, and that's not the best way to get elected, but you go with what you got.
Sure.
At this point, you know, for example, in the presidential races, we haven't seen the economy as a centerpiece in Iowa, in New Hampshire, But now that you're moving into some of these industrialized states in the Super Tuesday, I think you're going to see more of that. Plus, the rapidly changing economy, candidates cannot avoid it, and it's not going to be pretty. Let's go local a little bit. We've got a couple of minutes before the break. The tunnel was a big issue, and both Congressman Wolf and Congressman Davis went to Tim Kaine, who was prepared to approve that tunnel option or ask the FTA to consider it.
Right.
And Davis and Wolf came down and said, no, you can't do that, you'll kill the deal. Now, of course, and as time went on, Davis was painting himself as a tunnel supporter. I don't know whether Wolf ever did or not.
I'm not sure.
But here we are.
Actually, I don't believe he is. I don't believe he is.
Here we are, a year later now. We still haven't heard any final word from the FTA, and I'm not fully convinced they're going to fund this thing.
Right.
But Wolf was intransigent. He did the one thing, and some people suggest he was put up to it by Davis or whatever. Right. But to this day, I wonder whether they were playing political mischief, covering Bechtel's butt, who has that sole source contract,
right.
Or just asleep at the switch. I mean, they went out there, they stopped the tunnel, and then they backed away and disappeared.
Right.
What do you think?
Well, I would characterize this issue the way I characterize a lot of the issues as I do the research on Congressman Wolf and have done the research. You really have two issues. How did we get here, and where do we go from here? So let's talk about for just a second how we got here. I saw a wonderful quote on the web the other day by Governor Kaine that basically said, look, we all recognize we should have had rail to Dulles when the metro system was built. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sorry, that was Congressman Wolf's watch. The fact that Congressman Wolf, after 28 years, is now holding up as a signature issue that he got funding for rail to Dulles 20 years after we should have had rail to Dulles does not strike me as a particularly strong suit for Congressman Wolf. I'm concerned about the single source contract with Bechtel. I'm concerned about Bechtel's history with the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. I'm concerned that
And with the big dig.
Absolutely, with the big dig, that's right. I'm concerned with the fact that as you do the research, you find that the Federal Transit Authority's words as translated by Congressman Wolf and Congressman Davis to Governor Kaine may in fact not have been accurate, that in fact the Federal Transit Authority is quite neutral about either a tunnel or an aerial option. And I think it's one more case of asleep at the switch, not paying attention. Congressman Wolf seems to have a penchant for not understanding the repercussions of his actions or inactions. He looks behind, and then he slaps inadequate Band-Aids on obsolete problems, obsolete solutions. And that simply is not what we need. We need to move forward. So what do we need to do? Well, it's clear to me that the quality of life issue that's embedded here for the people of the 10th District and the people in the Tysons area, it's a cut and dried issue. They want the tunnel over the aerial option, period. And it's a resounding voice. It is a congressman's obligation to speak the voice of their voting population on the floors of Congress. And if that jeopardizes federal funding, and Frank Wolf sits on the Transportation Committee, then that's his homework assignment.
And he sits on the Appropriations Committee.
Absolutely.
You think he could exert some pressure?
That's his homework assignment.
And the FTA is run by the Republicans.
That's
what I couldn't understand, where Davis and Wolf were both
exactly right.
so weak, couldn't make any changes, couldn't deal with it, yet they were part, the administration should be listening to them.
That's exactly right.
They're part of that party.
Yeah.
It's break time again. We'll be back in 2 minutes. My guest is Mike Turner, Democratic candidate in the 10th Congressional District. That's Frank Wolf's seat. Please stay with us. Thank you for watching, and we'll be back in 2.
This is Mommy's bed. Me and Jenny were jumping on it. Mommy's gun fell on the floor. I was a cowboy. Bang, 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 bang. I said, Jenny, wake up, wake up. It's just pretend. But she wouldn't wake up.
If you give me a fish.
If you give someone a fish,
you feed them for a day.
Teach someone to fish.
You feed them for a lifetime.
Give me a fish, and you'll feed me for a day. Teach me to fish, and you'll feed me for a lifetime.
Through Volunteers of America, you can help change lives in your community.
Oh, hey, mister, studied algebra in school and got a better job than I could. You take the last cup.
Oh, no, mister. Stuck in an entry-level job because you only learned basic math. I don't have a boss riding my butt like you do, so you take it so you can get back to your desk.
You know, I probably should, but maybe Miss AP Calculus with the $200 haircut in the big office upstairs would like a cup.
Oh, no, Mr. What was your name again? Never mind, it doesn't matter. I'm too busy doing important things to care. I just came down for some sweet and start.
You know, if my limited math abilities weren't keeping me from getting a better job, I'd quit this afternoon.
I don't blame you. But thank goodness you're stuck here because we really need someone to make the coffee.
Now back to the Inside Scoop, Virginia. Call in live and let your voice be heard. Here again, your host, George Burke.
Welcome back to the final segment of Inside Scoop, Virginia. As I said earlier, my guest is Mike Turner, a Democrat running in the 10th Congressional District. You know, we were talking about some local issues to the 10th. There's been a big brouhaha over a power line they want to run that runs right through that district. And I understand it's going to run through some very pastoral land, some land that's hallowed ground from battles and the like, or at least nearby. It'll be in the sight lines and stuff. What's the deal?
Fascinating study, and it has the common theme with the tunnel issue and Congressman Wolf. Back in 2005, a congressman from West Virginia proposed House Resolution 6, which proposed, among other things, the creation of national interest electric transmission corridors. And the government agency in charge had the option, the obligation every few years to designate national interest electric transmission corridors in the United States. And Congressman Wolf, Congressman Davis, Senator Warner, and then Senator Allen all voted in favor of the what ultimately became the Energy Policy Act of 2005, with these NIETC corridors embedded in the legislation. Well, so what this corridor designation allows is it allows power companies to designate as eminent domain transmission corridors whereby they have determined that, and there's 5 or 6 criteria, that it's necessary to build power lines or to increase energy transmission through these corridors, and that they can use eminent domain to basically seize private property to do that. Well, lo and behold, a short time ago, the first NIETC was designated, the first 2 were designated, one in the Southwest and one in the Mid-Atlantic. And it stretches through Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, Maryland, and Northern Virginia. Now, this is legislation that Congressman Wolf and Congressman Davis voted for. They supported it, along with 256 or 55 other Republicans. Well, Congressman Wolf is quite vociferous in his objection right now, but I'm sorry, the horses are out of the barn at this point. In fact, what this is now is Dominion Power has proposed an overland transmission power line, which goes through Northern Virginia and actually connects to the obsolete coal-fired energy power plants of the Ohio River Valley, which will also increase business for the coal industry in West Virginia, which is where the congressman who proposed this legislation lives. And it's archaic. So what we're essentially doing is we are using essentially an antique power transmission method that we haven't investigated any alternatives. We're seizing private property to do it, to hook up to an obsolete energy system, which enables us to continue to be overly dependent on non-sustainable resources.
Am I right in assuming that we're not going to get the benefit out of this energy? It's just passing through us?
Just passing through. Just passing through. Yeah. We're good Americans, and so we should be proud to allow the energy to pass through our areas. It's an appallingly bad piece of legislation. And now Congressman Wolf is backpedaling as fast as he can backpedal to try and figure out a way to stop this from impacting Northern Virginia. And the PEC, the Piedmont Environmental Council, and the governor and Congressman Wolf and Congressman Davis are pursuing any and all means whatsoever to shut this project down, as I would as a freshman congressman. But once again, we find that because he was unable to simply anticipate the results and the impact on his community and his constituents of his actions and his votes, we find ourselves once again slapping a Band-Aid on a bad idea.
Well, I hope you keep reminding the voters that he voted to put this thing in, because that tends to be a pattern with these guys, you know. They vote with the leadership, and the way it is in the Republican-controlled, when it was the Republican-controlled Congress, if you wanted a leadership position, you better toe the party line. They didn't call Tom DeLay the hammer for nothing.
That's right.
You had very moderate Republicans like Jack Quinn out of Buffalo who left the House because they couldn't get a committee chairmanship because they refused to vote on all this conservative crap that the Republicans were foisting on their own members and the minority party in an effort to promote their political agenda more than anything else. Just like the Speaker has put Brian Moran and several other members of the House of Delegates on committees specifically designed to hurt them politically because of the things they have to vote for. Again, it would hurt a Republican. I think they think like Republicans. It would hurt a Republican more than a Democrat who's going to support some progressive measures. Anyway, we only have a few minutes left. Let's get into the presidential a little bit. I have formally endorsed Hillary Clinton. And I understand that you have formally endorsed Barack Obama.
I have.
I think we both agree that the Democratic Party is lucky to have two candidates of that caliber.
Absolutely.
I think it's very unique that we have, for the first time in history, we have a woman and an African American as our two potential nominees. I mean, I don't want to rule out Edwards because the media certainly has thrown him to the dogs. You know, we still got to see how he does in South Carolina and how he does in some of these states on the 5th. But it appears to rapidly be moving into a two-person race. And I'm a little concerned, but I guess it's natural that they're starting to snipe at each other a little more than they were. And, you know, I mean, I can say quite bluntly I'm supporting Hillary Clinton because I think she has experience. I think she's proven herself as a senator from New York. You know, when she was first elected, she won New York City and a couple of the other Democratic strongholds in some of the cities in New York State, and I'm originally from New York, so I understand the politics there. But this last time she ran, she won support statewide. I mean, she won in Republican strongholds. She won those areas, so she has won over her electorate there, and I think proven herself. And I know I worked for many years for the firefighters, and she literally right after 9/11 managed to pass a desperately needed piece of legislation. We needed to provide funding to the families, et cetera, and she got it done in a matter of weeks. Having said that, Obama is Mr. Charisma, Mr. Rock Star. You know, he was at the Democratic Party of Virginia's big Jefferson-Jackson Day dinner last year. He wowed the crowd. You get to him one-on-one, he has some of that Clinton-esque charisma where when he talks to you one-on-one, he envelops you, you know. So what's your take on Obama? Why are you supporting him?
Well, it was an interesting process that I came to that conclusion. I'd heard a lot of the buzz, and I picked his book up and I read it. Now, when you read candidates' books, you clearly are reading, you know,
somebody like me wrote to boot for them.
So we understand that going in. However, I will say that about halfway through the book, I realized that I was reading about the life of someone who, in my personal opinion, was a profoundly good and decent human being, who, in my judgment, based on what I was reading, simply had no guile. This was a guy who graduated, first African-American editor of the Harvard Law Review, and graduated and could have gone to work for any law firm in the country, and chose to go back to Chicago and do community-based activism. That tells me a great deal about who that person is. What excites me about Barack Obama is what excites me about my campaign and my opportunity this year to run against Frank Wolf, which I'm very excited about. I think we need to rethink how we do politics in this country. And I mean that at virtually every level, right down to the grassroots level. And it goes back to the point that I made early on in the discussion that Americans have this sense of malaise that we've lost our anchor. I think Barack Obama has the kind of vision and the kind of forward viewpoint that is so desperately needed and desired by the American people. And that's what I want for the men and women of the 10th District. There is a synergy, there's an empathy there with this man that I've not felt in my lifetime. It's just so profoundly exciting to me to have somebody in the scene. And when I had my campaign kickoff event, I talked to my volunteers and I said, this is a unique year in American politics. Don't sit on your hands. It's very exciting. Get involved and get engaged. And to prove that, I believe that you should lead from the front. It wouldn't make any sense for me to entreat you to get engaged if I weren't willing to take some risk myself. And so I said, I'm going to endorse Barack Obama because I think he's the right person. If you're for Hillary Clinton, if you're for John Edwards, that's okay. That's just fine. But my guy's Barack Obama. I remain the only Virginia candidate presently to have formally endorsed Barack Obama. I know Governor Kane has, but he's not a candidate.
I was going to say, you're good
That's
company
right.
with the
That's
governor.
right. I'm proud to do it, and I've told the Obama team all the way up to the national level that anything I can do to help Senator Obama, I'll be happy to do.
Let's talk about your candidacy once more. One of the things I like to do when I have a candidate on this show is give them a minute to talk right to the viewers and tell them what you think. So you got your minute in the sun to tell them why they should vote for you.
Well, great. Let me expand on the theme that I just covered. This is an extraordinary time in American history. We are faced with genuine challenges. We are at war right now globally with an insidious, sophisticated enemy, possibly one of the most dangerous threats we've faced in our time. We are facing serious economic challenges over the next 2 to 3 years. We have a congressman who has done the best he could for a very long time, who has demonstrated repeatedly over the recent years that his biggest claim to fame is that he can get reelected. And I believe that I can do a better job as a U.S. congressman. My history of public service demonstrates a capacity to care about the people that I serve and to craft coherent, rational, good, pragmatic solutions. And I choose to do that in 2008.
Mike, it's been great having you on the show today. I think we covered a lot of ground. We could probably spend another couple of hours talking on issues. Those issues are going to crystallize in the coming months, and I'll have you back on the show. I'll certainly have the other Democratic nominee, Judy Fader, on the show, and maybe we can even end up doing a Democratic debate.
I'd love that. Anytime, any place.
Before the primary's over.
You bet.
We're certainly going to try and do one with the 11th. There's no reason. I mean, the 10th occupies a piece of Fairfax County. Again, I thank you for being here. I thank the viewers for watching. Again, my guest was Mike Turner, the Democratic candidate in the 10th Congressional District. He will be running against Judy Fader in the primary, and their ultimate goal is to defeat Frank Wolf. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week on Inside Scoop Virginia.